Hello to my fellow classmates and professor. Today I want to explain why three-strike laws are cruel and unnecessary. I will start, however, by explaining what exactly a three-strike law is. According to James Padmeister, in 1994, the United States Department of Justice passed the Violent Crimes Control and Law Enforcement Act, which declared that all people convicted of violent felonies or two or more crimes would be facing mandatory life sentences. Now, while that description may not necessarily sound unusually cruel, in practice, three-strike or habitual offender laws often result in nonviolent offenders serving life sentences, disproportionately affects minorities, and has done little to actually improve crime rates. There are endless examples of three-strike laws requiring nonviolent offenders to serve life sentences. These offenders often being convicted of drug possession and use. Regardless of your stance on drug use, it seems unnecessary for a person to serve extended periods of time in prison over a drug addiction rather than being treated in a rehab facility. In the case of Bernard Noble, a 49-year-old man living in New Orleans, he had 2 joints of marijuana and ended up in prison for 13 years. According to Joy Havifield, Noble was riding a bike when stopped by police and searched. On him, they found a small amount of marijuana, but because of his previous run-in with the police and convictions of marijuana and cocaine possession, he was convicted and sentenced to 13 years in prison. If that sounds ridiculous to you, consider the case of Jeff Minzowski. According to his son, Chris Minzowski, Jeff was arrested at the age of 41 for marijuana possession. Because of the enforcement of three-strike laws and his previous convictions with marijuana possession, Jeff Minzowski was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. And because the repeated non-violent convictions of drug possession fall under the jurisdiction of three-strike laws, the African American community disproportionately suffers. According to ACLU.org, drug use among African Americans and white Americans is relatively equal. However, because it is easier for police to, quote, concentrate their forces in inner-city neighborhoods where drug deals tend to take place on the streets, the result is a disproportionate arrest of African Americans for drug use and drug possession. Additionally, a study of Georgia's enforcement of a two-strike law done by ACLU found that 98.4% of prisoners serving life because of the law were African American. High rates of African American incarceration under a three-strike law in California were also reported. So not only are these three-strike laws requiring nonviolent offenders to serve life sentences and disproportionately affecting minorities, but enforcement of three-strike laws has done little to actually reduce crime. According to sociologist Robert Parker, crime rates in California after the passing of the three-strike law resulted in a similar decline in violence that was found in states with no three-strike law. He reports that this decline in crime would most likely be attributed to a decline in alcohol consumption rather than a decline because of the three-strike law. And ACLU reports that this law enforcement of three-strike laws is more likely to increase violence, as repeated offenders would, quote, be far more likely to resist arrest, to kill witnesses, or to attempt a prison escape. Now, after hearing all of this, it should be clear to you that three-strike or habitual offender laws are unproductive and need to be abandoned altogether. The legislation is arguably worsening society by increasing incarceration rates, and there is evidence to support that three-strike laws often result in life in prison for nonviolent offenders with minor drug charges, as well as disproportionately incarcerating minorities and doing little to actually prevent violence. I hope you consider these facts, and thank you for listening.